This is a library where people come to do research, looking at 3x5 card catalogs, dealing with big fat index books, and walking up and down the stacks, unless you have a computer, a modem, and a subscription to an online database, and then you can let your fingers do the walking. Today, we'll take a look at the high end of online databases on this edition of the Computer Chronicles.
The Computer Chronicles is made possible by Leading Edge, makers of IBM-compatible computer systems, including Lotus Lookalike Spreadsheet, word processing with spelling correction, communication software, and Hayes-compatible 1200 baud modem. Leading Edge with over 1,000 service centers nationwide. Additional funding is provided by McGraw-Hill, publishers of Byte. Byte's detailed technical articles on new hardware, software, and languages cover developments in computer technology worldwide.
Welcome to the Computer Chronicles. I'm Stuart Chaffee, and sitting in for Gary Kildall this week is George Morrow. George, I want to show you something. This is a directory of online databases, published about 7 years ago. Very large print in here, very thin book. Earlier this year, the same people published a directory of online databases, very small print, very thick book, and by the time they got done publishing this, they already had to come up with an addendum because news services had come online.
Should have been online.
I guess you're right. Now, this seems to be growing very quickly, yet fewer than 40% of PC owners own a modem. Only about 5% actually use online services. Why?
Well, you have to try it yourself, Stuart. It has the flavor of a black hole. It's tough. The modem is easy. Hayes compatible, that's all settled. But then you've got the step of mastering the COM software and then mastering the interface into the online service itself. I tried to get a quote in Apple stock one evening. Never did get it
figure it
done.
out.
Never got it done.
We'll see if we can get you some help today, George. We're going to look at some specialized online services, things like Bix and Dialog, Nexus and Lexus, and something called EasyNet, which lets you access lots of online services even though you're not a member. Now, one of the hot areas in online services, as George suggested, is financial information, and one of the new products is something called Lotus OneSource, which combines online information with CD-ROM storage. We have a report.
When it was first introduced, the CD-ROM appeared to be a technology searching for an application. Today, the 500 megabyte compact disc is beginning to get some serious attention. Lotus, famous for its 123 spreadsheet, is testing a CD-ROM financial database system called OneSource that functions within 123. OneSource includes a CD-ROM containing 20 years of financial information on over 6,000 companies. The disk is combined with PC-based analytical software and an FM radio receiver for real-time stock quotes.
Assuming I want to monitor my portfolio on an intraday basis. When I load in the portfolio, it goes out to the reader, pulls down the shares outstanding and the price from the purchase date that I've specified, and calculates how many shares I would have bought on a market valuated basis and buys those shares on that date, and then from that point it goes out to the receiver and begins pricing my portfolio on the day, and it shows me how much I'm up for the day or down for the day in each security.
For a yearly subscription of $11,000 to $27,000, an updated CD-ROM is delivered weekly. Compared to using a modem, the speed of the CD-ROM is dazzling, the equivalent of 110,000 bits per second. It takes about 6 seconds to retrieve 8,000 items on a single company. While computers have not succeeded in penetrating every office, some businesses seem to be more receptive than others, and Lotus hopes that their new offline-online service will win new converts in the financial world.
Joining us now in the studio is Connie Tomel. Connie is West Coast Branch Manager for Me Data Central, Nexus and Lexus, and so on. And next to Connie is Doug Webster, the Director of Business and Marketing for Bix, Byte Magazine's online service. George?
Doug, we all, people in the computer industry like to think of Byte as the Scientific American of computing. How is it that they got into doing the Bix thing?
Well, Editor-in-Chief Phil Lemons had seen conferencing begin to grow as a technology, and he put two and two together and realized that the Byte readership, which represents a living database of knowledge about and involvement with microcomputers, could use conferencing to exchange information with each other. The magazine could use it to speed information to our readership base and to other microcomputer enthusiasts, and we could gather information back from them, and it's worked very well.
So BIX is a living, growing database on micros.
Yes, it is. We started commercial operations in November of 1985, and we're approaching 12,000 users after our first full year.
Doug, give us, we're online with BIX right now. Give us a
Right.
little sample look at what you can get out of BIX.
Well, the heart of the system, Stuart, is conferences, and we have about 140 different conferences on the system. They're broken down into a broad series of groups, and these are the groups, about a dozen of them. So we have a series of conferences about computers and languages and operating systems. Each user that comes on the system can choose from amongst the conferences that are there those which are of specific interest to them. So, for example, most everybody who's on BIX has a computer, and I would say show group, back up here, computers, and a list of them appears, and these are just some of the ones that we have, starting with Amiga and running on down through Zenith. Now, let's say, for example, that I'm interested in an IBM computer. I can choose to join the IBM conference, so all I have to do to join it at any time is simply to say, join IBM, and I see that the listing of it was PC, so I say, join IBM PC, and
You forgot the P.
I forgot the P. Let's
To
try
be
that
part of that conference, do you actually have to be online, or can you come and go?
You need to join it once, and from then on you are a member of it until you choose to resign it.
So you can be part of it without actually being online.
Right. And the system keeps track of the fact that you are now a member of the IBM PC conference, and you see here a listing of topics within it. The discussions are further broken down within IBM PC, so that you see software and hardware and so forth.
Doug, what does it mean to be a member of the conference? What does that get you?
Well, as I said, we've got about 12,000 users approaching that on the system. Some of them have said, I'm interested in IBM PC. Everybody who said that now is linked together in this conference and can exchange information with each other. So anybody else out of those 12,000 who's interested in IBM PC joins that conference, and they are now a member of one of these, many of these topic areas.
So if I'm a member of that conference, if I have a rumor or if I have an opinion and I put it on there, the other people who are members of that conference are able to get that.
Right. For example, I'm going to join the hardware topic here, and we'll start out in the midst of the conference. And BIX keeps track of what I've read and haven't read. I'm usually a member of IBM PC, and it says you've got 47 messages that you haven't read since the last time you were on. So it takes me to the first unread one, in this case number 1886. In the header is some additional information which tells you who sent the message, when it was sent, in this case December 13th, and the fact that it is a comment to message number 1876, and there are comments about this between here and the end. Now, BIX has a very powerful feature which allows you to read by message thread. And the comments, I'd like to find what people said about this message without reading all 47 messages. So I will say, I want to read by reference. And BIX starts looking down the string of remaining messages, and notice it jumped from 1886 to 96 to find the first message that referred back, so you can read things by thread. One of the other powerful features on the system is the ability to search for information. I'm going to join an area of the system called microbytes. Hardware, and this is where we put information about new products which we receive, several thousand every month, and this allows us to get much more new product information out to Byte readers.
Doug, suppose I join a conference. Do I have access to the information that went on in that conference prior to joining it?
Most of the transactions which have gone on since we began last November are still available. And
You also do
users
live
like
conferences, Doug?
Not as yet. We're looking at that. There's great interest in it. We have the capability, but right now we do not have real-time conferencing as such.
Connie, I want to ask you to sign on to Nexus so we can take a look at that in just a second. While we're waiting for Connie, Doug, let me ask you about BIX. Are there any plans to expand BIX beyond being just a conference-based system?
Well, we already have a number of other services. A number of companies are providing online technical support for their products, including Borland and Microsoft. And we also have a lot of software that users can download, electronic mail, and we're looking at things like research and online advertising as well.
Okay, Connie, now you've got a Macintosh up here and you're online with Nexus. Tell us about Nexus and about the example of a search you're going to show us.
Nexus is Me Data Central's general news and business information service. It contains 145 files, which are organized into files that can be searched all at one time by the type of information, business, finance, that sort of thing, or by the types of information. What I've asked for it to do today is to look into the business file, which contains things like Forbes and Fortune and Business Week, as well as into the New York Times and the LA Times, both of which are updated every 24
what are you looking
hours.
for? What's the problem
Okay,
we're
the
working on?
problem we're going to be looking for is stories relating to the recent merger between Delta and Western Airlines and whether that's going to have any implications to employees regarding being laid off. The search that I've put on the keyboard is essentially directing the system to look in those files and then looking for occurrences of Delta within 15 or fewer words of Western, within a few words of all forms of the word merge or takeover, and the plural will be added automatically.
Connie, what kind of people would be doing this sort of thing?
Primarily people in a research capacity. This would be people doing background for the news media, or people honestly interested perhaps from the union angle, concerned about the fate of the employees involved. Or it could be lawyers or management to an increasing extent, yes.
Okay. You were describing the parameters of the search there.
Yes, let me begin to run the search and continue to explain that to you. We have put in place, there are several numerical connectors, and those are under the complete control of the researcher, so that I could ask that those words appear very close together in some cases if I'm looking for some sort of a proper name, or that they can appear as much as 255 words apart, which allows a lot of flexibility in composing the search. Now the system has come back and it's told me that it's found 3 stories through this level of research, and I have several options of ways to look at those stories. Using the Macintosh, I'll pull down the display formats and select Quick, which stands for Keywords in Context. What that will do is display for me an excerpt of the full text of the first document. The documents come back in reverse chronological order. We see that the first one is from the New York Times from September of 1986. The section, the length, the headline, and the byline. And then we move directly into the body.
And those keywords I see are highlighted there.
Yes, the keywords are highlighted, and we get a sense from that there are very few concerns for the employees of either of the companies. Right.
And what would you do? You could move on to the next document?
Yes, now we can click ourselves into the next document, which is a slightly older document, this one from the LA Times. And again, we move directly into the body of the 1100
keywords.
And there are the keywords, and a quote from a spokesperson from the company indicating that Delta has not laid anyone off since the early 1950s.
Connie, when you talk about the 145 files, what is that in terms of databases? What can we look at potentially? This was New York Times, LA Times, and some business magazines.
Right. We also have materials involving government documents and technical information such as material safety data sheets, which companies are using to advise employees on how to handle toxic materials and things of that nature.
And these are full texts?
Yes. All of the materials are full text, and they are the complete text of each of the issues, so it's not selected
Now, this
text.
language that you used in order to give you access to this information, how hard is it to learn?
It's really quite easy to learn. The basic training class runs between an hour and a half and 2 hours.
Okay, one of the problems, of course, is sometimes you're looking for information and you don't know how to look or where to look for it. Well, there's something in Berkeley called Information on Demand, and Wendy Woods has a report on that.
The fact that much of the world's knowledge is now available on online databases is nothing short of a miracle. But it's also something of a miracle for you to successfully navigate through it all to find out what you're looking for. Database searching is complex, often confusing, and almost always expensive. Enter Information on Demand in Berkeley, California, one of a new breed of business called the information broker. Almost any fact you need, from the price of gold to the use of pesticides in Nigeria, is somewhere in an online database, and these people have the skills to find it.
If you're not very competent, it's really best to come to an expert. We can get you exactly what you're after very quickly, get into the system and out of it with your information. We're really a one-stop shopping mart for information. Copy of every publicly available document and research on subjects as varied as you can possibly imagine.
Like a story quoting the Chronicles host, Stuart Shafay. A keyword search on one of the major databases produced several articles on the Computer Chronicles within several minutes. Information on Demand has access to dozens of online services, each with hundreds of databases, all with thousands of entries.
If I'm making a decision to go into business somewhere, I want to know about my competition. Today, in the business world, which is a very cutthroat business world today, we can't afford not to know. And this is where the information broker comes in.
In Berkeley, for the Computer Chronicles, I'm Wendy Woods.
With us now in the studio is Roger Summit, the president of Dialogue Information Services, and next to Roger, Dick Cullen, the president of Telebase Systems. George?
Roger, Give our viewers a little bit of a background. Suppose that somebody were going to take Ladies' Home Journal from the late 30s and make that part of your database. What would have to happen for that to take place?
Well, we would have to first feel that there was an audience.
Assuming there was an audience.
And if we want to assume that,
maybe electronics from that period.
Right. We would license that database from the producer, and in the license agreement, we would pay royalties back to the producer based on the use of the database.
But how would it become digital from something on paper?
How do you get it in there?
Well, we would receive it on magnetic tape from the producer. We would then re-index the whole thing according to word and word position so that it would work under the dialogue system and add it to our collection of databases.
Something like this, how long does it take once you make a decision?
Well, once we sign a contract, we can get a database up as early as 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes it takes 6 months. It depends a lot on the state of the database.
Roger, give us some idea of what kinds of databases are on Dialog, and then perhaps we can look at one.
Yes. Well, Dialog is the world's largest online database covering virtually every subject imaginable, so it's a little difficult to describe in a categorical sense. But
so all of the above?
All of the above. We have databases in science and technology, in medicine, in education, in business, covering company and product data, financial data, geographical and market data, as well as census data and several other things like that.
The AT&T of information?
Perhaps the AT&T of information, yes.
Okay, Roger, show us how you would search through Dialog and set up the problem for us. What are we looking for?
Yeah, the situation I thought might be interesting. I was having a discussion, argument with an attorney on the utility of the strict product liability laws that have run up insurance rates so much, as we understand. He was arguing the merits of the case. I was arguing that it's really done some damage to industry and products. He won, but I went to the database and pulled out some things that I thought demonstrated my...
Using a database to settle an argument.
Exactly.
Okay, go ahead.
And I thought we'd do that here. So what I've done is to go into the insurance abstracts database, and I've put in the instruction for product liability and strict. And I've gotten 38 items then from putting in that command, and we can take a look at some of those items. So this first item that comes up talks about recent court decisions of interest in product liability. I'll put up the second one here. It says punishment for profit, an examination of the punitive damage award in strict liability. And the abstract here says it discusses excessive and punitive damages and their applicability to strict liability.
Okay, Roger, where are these articles coming from now? What's the source?
Well, this particular one comes from the Forum, which is a trade journal within the insurance industry.
So you've got lots of industry journals, trade journals, all of that kind of stuff.
We cover over 10,000 journals and magazines.
Now, these people, the Forum here, when you access or I access that information, do they get paid a royalty?
Yes. Each of the databases...
There's an income stream that comes from this information stuff.
Based on its usage. Now, this was insurance abstracts, and I thought it might be interesting to see how engineers think about product liability. I can do that by just changing databases. And I'm saying here begin 8, which is the Compendex database. And then I can key right on ahead, and I'll key in select product liability and strict.
Okay, and now what you're doing is going to an engineering database and seeing what engineer authors are thinking about this.
Putting in basically the same command. Now, what I'm going to do this time is just show some of the titles so we can scan through some of those. I'm saying just type the first 5 of those titles. Here we have product liability in Australia, product liability and admissibility of subsequent remedial measures, products liability, how can we minimize hazards? Now that's an interesting one. Let's take a look at the full record on that.
We're not going to have time, I don't think, to do that, Roger, but I guess the point is you can look at a problem from a lot of different angles in something like Dialog.
And you people have the ability to do that.
Which is very important if you're a reporter, a student, or whatever.
Roger, what about the role of CD-ROMs here? Before I ask that, I want to ask you, Dick, to get ready to get EasyNet on here. And while we're waiting for that, what about CD-ROMs, a massive database like you have? Doesn't that play a role in it?
You can take small, specialized databases and put them on CD-ROM. We've just done that with the ERIC database and announced a CD-ROM product. But what we've done is to integrate the CD-ROM and the online so that you can search offline on CD-ROM, press a button, get online, get the current material or search-related information with ease. We think that's the way it's going to go.
Dick, now we talked about EasyNet, but in fact, you're really a gateway called a lot of different things. Why don't you describe the system first?
It's a gateway that's mostly known as EasyNet, but also known as iQuest on the CompuServe service and InfoMaster on the Western Union service. EasyNet is more than a gateway. It's a smart gateway. You would think of a gateway as a simple switch where you come into the service and you get switched over to different databases. We not only do that, but we also have a large part of the system, which I'll show you, that helps you find the database that you're looking for. EasyNet connects to 820 databases, of which most of which are included.
Now, the searching and stuff like that on all these 820 databases, does your service civilize that at all? Am I doing the same keyword kinds of things?
Yes, there's a major attempt here to standardize the input. It allows, and what we're mostly proud of is that it allows absolutely to go into the service without training. It's whim.
Dick, why don't you show us? We're online
Sure.
now with iQuest, and show us how it works.
If iQuest 1 says we pick the database, in other words, if you don't know of the 820 where to go or what to do, and then iQuest 2 is you know exactly, you've been on before, you know exactly where you want to go to. And if we pick the database, it'll go through an interview, which it starts off subject,
help
person,
you figure out which database to go
place,
for.
right, and then if you pick a subject, it sort of breaks the world down into categories. Now, we do assume that you can take your question or the problem that you've got and fit it in here somewhere. Sometimes it isn't necessary because you can come back and do another branch.
Yeah.
So now I can look at law, trademarks, and patents if I want to.
Sure.
This does address your concern a bit, George, doesn't it? I mean,
Yes,
this
it
is
does.
not some strange command.
That's right. 820 databases where I don't have to learn a different command for each one of them.
And although the results may not be as totally thorough as you would like, you certainly can get on a whim at home, which is what we're showing right now on CompuServe. You can get on, you can do a search, you can come back with respectable results, and it works without any training. And the goal of EasyNet is to make online service as easy and available to the world as possible.
The trade-off is a little less depth, but a lot easier to use.
That's right.
Now, Dick,
and what we've discovered over the years, I say this with all deference, that people forget training.
Yeah.
And it's really a problem that, you know, we've had people tell us that they've gone to sessions, they've studied, and they don't remember because the search frequency turns out to be about 4 to 6 times a year. It seems like the average person.
But there are areas in which you do begin to get in depth, and you want to have access to all the tools. Is there a way to turn off? Can I go in and become a power user in your system?
When you go to the second option, it offers many more tools. For example, all the field searching that's available becomes available with
so you can turn it on and off.
That's right.
Good.
And you can get full-text articles out of this. It's not just an indexing system.
Yes, indeed.
And what's the size of
It's more than that. Actually, when there is no full text on the system, with the press of one button, you can automatically order it through Information on Demand.
Okay, we're out of time, gentlemen. Thank you very much. We'll be back in just a minute with this week's Computer News. In the Random Access file this week, a special look at the Macworld Expo just held in San Francisco. It was the biggest Macworld show ever with more than 250 exhibitors. There were lots of new product introductions, but none from Apple itself. Apple's Vice President for Product Development, Jean-Louis Gasset, says the focus for Apple this year will not be on new products, but on better products.
The thrust of my thinking when we think collectively about developing products is really what we can do to do better what we do, which is liked by the marketplace, and what we can do to either minimize some of our shortcomings or make them strong points. And I think we have a clear identity of a product with the Macintosh, and we will expand and make it better. And that in itself is our goal.
As expected, most attention at the show went to desktop publishing applications, with several new products being introduced. Aldus came out with its new release of PageMaker version 2.0. The new PageMaker has some 20 new features, including file compatibility with files created on an MS-DOS word processor. There's also file compatibility with PageMaker 1.0. Probably the hottest completely new desktop publishing software was Illustrator from Adobe. It lets you create sophisticated graphics made up of curves and lines rather than dots. It also lets you scan in an image and build your final drawing from the scanned picture. Another new piece of publishing software was Scoop, a page composition program from Target Software. Scoop lets you simultaneously build text and graphics on the same page at the same time, and it allows you to quickly wrap text around irregularly shaped graphics. Scoop is due out May the 1st. Finally, Bree Communications of Canada introduced Set and Send, software which automatically inserts typesetting codes and commands in a document and then lets you send the complete coded file directly to a CompuGraphics MCS typesetting machine. On the hardware side, again, the focus was on desktop publishing. eMachines of Oregon introduced its Big Picture Monitor for the Mac, which lets you look at a complete page from PageMaker, or even lets you reduce the size and look at two adjacent pages, yet still be able to read the text. The Big Picture's 17-inch display is more than 4 times the size of the Mac screen. And if you like your Mac, but also like Amber displays, Systems Research showed off a new Amber monitor for the Macintosh. Another hardware highlight of the Macworld Expo was the introduction of 2 flat Macs, or laptop portable Macs. The Dynamac features an electroluminescent, full-size display. It weighs in at around 15 pounds. There's an optional hard drive and modem. Colby Systems also showed off a portable Mac, which it calls the Lap Mac. It features a gas plasma display and has a removable keyboard and a removable hard drive. The Lap Mac also weighs in at around 15 pounds. Both the Lap Mac and the Dynamac will be pricey at about $5,000. There was one interesting new word processor introduced for the Mac called MindWrite. It features an integrated outliner, a function called Find All, which lets you copy paragraphs containing key words. It lets you use the mouse to directly move text without having to cut and paste. And it lets you window text so that you can compare different parts of a document on the same screen at the same time. MindWrite sells for $125. Finally, if you still think desktop publishing is boring, one vendor introduced a software program called McPlaymate, which lets you integrate some rather interesting graphics into your otherwise dull documents, putting a little spice into your McLife. That's it for this week's Chronicles. We'll see you next time.
The Computer Chronicles is made possible by Leading Edge, makers of IBM-compatible computer systems, including Lotus Lookalike Spreadsheet, word processing with spelling correction, communication software, and Hayes-compatible 1200 baud modem. Leading Edge, with over 1,000 service centers nationwide. Additional funding is provided by McGraw-Hill, publishers of Byte. Byte's detailed technical articles on new hardware, software, and languages cover developments in computer technology worldwide.